Hello everyone. I'm the storyteller from the channel Whispered Tales and I'm here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from? At what time are you watching? Now, get comfortable and relax. The night was unusually still. Not a single leaf stirred in the ancient oaks lining the deserted road, and the moon hung low and thin, like a silent witness to the quiet world beneath it. In the distance, the faint hum of a town already asleep buzzed faintly, a sleepy lullaby drowned by the weight of darkness pressing closer. Eleanor Gray's car cut through the night, headlights piercing a narrow ribbon of asphalt that wound through the forest like a silver thread. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles pale from the tension she couldn't quite explain. The GPS had lost signal miles ago. Somewhere out here, far from the reassuring glow of civilization, she was chasing a secret, one whispered about in old letters, faded photographs, and half-forgotten memories. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, a single message blinking on the cracked screen. She glanced down. Don't trust the shadows. They listen. The words made her heart thud faster. She tried to laugh it off. Probably just a prank from her brother, or one of those creepy fan messages from the blog she'd started, documenting local legends and hauntings. But something deep in her gut warned otherwise. Eleanor had come to Hawthorne Hollow to find answers. A small, forgotten town nestled in the folds of the Appalachian Mountains, it was rumored to be the resting place of dark histories no one dared speak aloud. Generations had vanished here without trace. Townsfolk whispered of the whispering shadows that roamed the woods at night, stealing the souls of those who dared venture too far. The car's headlights briefly illuminated a narrow turnoff marked by a faded wooden sign, "Welcome to Hawthorne Hollow." The paint was peeling, and half the letters were worn away, but the words seemed to shimmer unnaturally in the weak light. Eleanor turned the wheel sharply, tires crunching on gravel as she entered the town. The streets were deserted. Old wooden houses, some with boarded windows, lined the crooked roads. A thick fog curled between the buildings, twisting around street lamps like ghostly fingers. The silence was heavy, almost suffocating, broken only by the soft echo of her footsteps as she stepped out of the car. She pulled her jacket tighter, feeling a sudden chill despite the summer night. Her eyes scanned the darkness, catching the occasional glint of something just beyond sight, a fleeting shadow, a whisper of movement. Ahead, a flickering neon sign buzzed weakly, "The Hollow's End Inn." It was the only place still lit, promising warmth and maybe a hint of the answers she sought. Inside, the inn smelled of old wood and musty fabric. A lone figure sat behind the counter, an old man with rheumy eyes that seemed to pierce right through her. "You're not from around here," he said, voice low and gravelly. "Few come to Hawthorne Hollow by choice." "I'm looking for someone," Eleanor said cautiously. The man nodded slowly, as if expecting this. "The shadows have a way of hiding what you want most. But they always take a price." She shivered again, the weight of those words pressing on her. That night, Eleanor lay awake in the creaking bed, listening to the wind moan through the cracks in the walls. The darkness seemed to seep under the door, curling around the room like a living thing. Then she heard it, the faintest whisper. A breath of sound, almost too soft to catch. At first, she thought it was the wind, but the words began to form, fragile and haunting. "You shouldn't be here. You don't belong." Her heart slammed against her ribs. She pulled the covers up and closed her eyes, trying to tell herself it was just her imagination. But the whisper came again, clearer this time, like a voice brushing her ear. "Leave, before it's too late." Eleanor's eyes snapped open. She wasn't alone. Eleanor sat up, the old quilt tangled around her legs. The room was still, save for the creaks and groans of the aging inn. She reached for the small flashlight on the bedside table and clicked it on, the narrow beam cutting through the darkness. The light settled on the cracked wallpaper, peeling like dead skin from the walls, and on the heavy wooden door that stood firmly closed. But the whispering didn't stop. This time, it was no longer just words. It was a pattern, a slow, rhythmic chant that seemed to seep from the shadows themselves, drawing closer with every heartbeat. "Leave, before the shadows claim you, before the darkness wakes." Her breath caught. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. She wanted to tell herself it was her mind playing tricks, fueled by the isolation and strange stories. But deep down, she knew that whatever haunted Hawthorne Hollow was real, and it was watching. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, the mist wrapping the town in a thick blanket. Eleanor dressed quickly, the chill lingering like a ghost's touch. She needed answers, and there was only one place left to look, the old Hawthorne Library, a building that loomed at the far edge of town, rumored to be the heart of the town's dark secrets. The library's wooden doors creaked open with an eerie welcome. Inside, rows of dusty shelves stretched into shadowed aisles, and the faint smell of mold and forgotten memories filled the air. A single librarian, a woman with sharp eyes and a pale face, looked up as Eleanor entered. "You're here about the disappearances," the woman said quietly, as if reading Eleanor's thoughts. "Many come searching for the truth. Few leave unchanged." Eleanor nodded, her fingers brushing over a thick volume bound in cracked leather. The book's title was embossed in faded gold letters, "Whispers of the Hollow." Opening it, Eleanor found pages filled with old newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, and sketches, faces of missing townsfolk, dates, strange symbols, and references to a shadowy presence known only as the Whispering Shadow. Hours passed as Eleanor pored over the records. She learned of a dark ritual, performed generations ago by a secret society desperate to protect the town from an ancient evil that lurked beneath the soil. The ritual had sealed the entity away, but at a terrible cost. The Whispering Shadows were said to be fragments of that evil, trapped between worlds, hungry for souls to replace those they had lost. The more Eleanor read, the heavier the air around her seemed to become, as if the shadows themselves were closing in. Outside, the fog thickened, wrapping the town in an impenetrable veil. That night, the whispers returned, louder and more urgent. Eleanor lay awake, clutching the book to her chest, trying to make sense of the warning scrawled in trembling handwriting on the margins. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing her candle. In the pitch black, the whispering grew into a chorus, echoing, overlapping voices that spoke of pain, fear, and endless waiting. Her room door creaked open slowly, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. A shadow moved in the corner of her vision, a shifting, intangible shape that seemed to breathe and pulse. Heart racing, Eleanor forced herself to look directly at it. The shape twisted and flickered like smoke, forming vague outlines of faces, some pleading, some twisted in silent screams. The shadows weren't just watching. They were hungry. They were reaching. Eleanor scrambled out of bed, heart pounding like a drum in her ears. The shadows recoiled as if disturbed, but the oppressive chill lingered, clinging to her skin like icy fingers. She fumbled for the flashlight on the floor, her hands trembling as she clicked it on. The narrow beam cut through the darkness, but the room seemed larger somehow, endless, suffocating. The faces in the shadows pulsed again, their silent screams clawing at the edges of her mind. She forced herself to back toward the door, desperate to escape the room that felt like a prison. As her hand grasped the handle, the whispers sharpened into a terrible warning. "You cannot leave, not until the debt is paid." Eleanor froze. Debt? What debt? Her mind raced back to the book, to the faded notes about the ritual and the sacrifices made long ago. She had disturbed something ancient, something bound to this town, to her family's past. A sudden crash from downstairs made her jump. Heart hammering, she crept toward the door and listened. The inn was silent again, save for the soft tap of rain beginning against the window. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor threw open the door and slipped into the hallway. The dim light of a flickering bulb revealed old portraits hanging crookedly on peeling walls. Their eyes seemed to follow her every step. Downstairs, the inn's main room was empty, but something had clearly been overturned. A chair lay on its side, a glass shattered on the floor. A sudden chill ran down Eleanor's spine as she noticed muddy footprints leading toward the back door. She wasn't alone. The whispers returned, now surrounding her from every corner of the room. She spun around, flashlight slicing through the fog, but no one was there. Then, out of the gloom, a figure emerged, tall, cloaked in darkness, face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "Why are you here?" The voice was low, dripping with menace. Eleanor swallowed hard. "I want to understand. I want to help." The figure laughed, a hollow, echoing sound that seemed to shatter the fragile calm. "Help? The hollow doesn't want help. It wants to feed." The shadow stepped closer, and Eleanor felt the air grow colder, the weight of countless lost souls pressing down on her. Suddenly, the figure vanished into a swirl of mist, leaving behind a lingering voice, "Find the altar, before the shadows find you." Eleanor knew then that the only way out was deeper in, to uncover the truth buried beneath the town's cursed soil. Back in her room, she grabbed the book and a small pack, stuffing them into her bag. The whispers had not stopped, they followed her like a storm, relentless and cold. As she slipped out into the foggy night, the town felt alive, watching, waiting. Eleanor's journey into the heart of darkness was only just beginning. The fog lay thick over Hawthorne Hollow, swallowing the edges of the narrow streets and muffling the distant calls of night birds. Eleanor moved cautiously, her breath puffing white in the cold air. The heavy book in her bag seemed to pulse with a strange energy, as if alive, as if it knew the path she must take. Her destination was clear now, the altar. The cryptic warning from the shadow's voice had ignited a fire in her, a desperate need to find this place before the whispering shadows claimed her too. She followed the footprints she'd seen earlier, now faint in the muddy earth, leading away from the inn and toward the outskirts of the town. The trees here were ancient, towering like sentinels, their twisted branches blotting out the moonlight and casting monstrous silhouettes on the forest floor. The woods closed around her like a living maze. Every step seemed heavier, the air thicker, as if the shadows themselves weighed down her limbs. Then came the whispering again, soft, insistent, echoing between the trunks. turn back, or join us." Eleanor tightened her grip on the flashlight. The beam trembled as she scanned the darkness. She caught glimpses of movement, quick flickers of shadow darting just beyond the edge of the light. The stories in the book began to flood her mind, the ancient pact, the ritual sacrifices, the curse that bound the town. She thought of the faces she'd seen in the shadows, lost souls trapped in eternal torment, clawing for release. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the trees, a sound not quite animal, not quite human. Eleanor froze, heart pounding. From the darkness emerged a figure, gaunt, with hollow eyes that gleamed like dying embers. It lurched forward, limbs unnaturally long and twisted. Eleanor backed away, stammering, "I don't want to hurt you, I'm here to help." The creature's voice was a rasp, barely human. "Help, no one helps. They only take. Only pay the price." She ran. The forest swallowed her footsteps as she sprinted blindly, branches clawing at her face and arms. The whispers rose to a fevered pitch, a cacophony of voices begging, warning, cursing. Just as her lungs began to burn, she burst into a clearing bathed in unnatural silver light. At the center stood an ancient stone altar, worn and cracked, covered in strange runes that glowed faintly beneath the fog. Around it, symbols were etched into the earth, circles and lines forming a complex pattern. Eleanor's breath caught. This was the heart of the curse. The place where the ritual had been performed centuries ago. She stepped forward, hands trembling, and laid the book down on the altar. The runes pulsed brighter, responding to the book's presence. Suddenly, the air grew icy cold. The shadows gathered at the edge of the clearing, thick, swirling masses that stretched toward her like living smoke. From within them, voices rose in a haunting chorus, weaving a song of sorrow and rage. Eleanor felt the ground tremble beneath her feet. The altar's surface shimmered, revealing an inscription, "Those who seek the truth must pay in blood." Her fingers traced the words, and a wave of nausea swept over her. The price was clear. Desperation clawed at her mind. She thought of the missing, the trapped souls, and the terrible entity that fed on the town's fear. She had a choice: flee and save herself, or confront the darkness and try to end the curse. A shadow detached itself from the mass, forming into a tall figure cloaked in black. Its face was a void, a hollow absence that seemed to suck in all light. "You summoned us," it said, voice like the rustling of dead leaves. Eleanor swallowed her fear and said, "I want to end this. To free the souls trapped here." The figure laughed, a sound that echoed like breaking glass. "Many have tried. All have failed. The hollow demands its due." With a sudden motion, the shadows surged forward, engulfing Eleanor in darkness. But inside the void, she saw flashes, visions of the past. The ritual, the sacrifice, the pain that had fractured the world. A whisper broke through the noise, "Find the heart. Destroy it." Eleanor opened her eyes to find herself alone in the clearing. The shadows had retreated, leaving behind only the cold night and the pulsing altar. Clutching the book, she knew what she had to do. The heart of the curse lay buried beneath the town, in a place no one dared go. Her journey was far from over. The night air was thick with a cold that seemed unnatural, seeping into Eleanor's bones as she made her way back toward the town. The whispers still followed her, faint now but persistent, like a breath on the back of her neck. Her thoughts churned with the cryptic message, "Find the heart. Destroy it." But what was the heart? A place? An object? Or something more sinister, a living core of darkness feeding on the town's suffering? She knew the answer lay beneath Hawthorne Hollow, somewhere in the forgotten underground tunnels whispered about in the town's oldest legends. The next morning, Eleanor returned to the library. The pale librarian was there again, but this time, her expression was different, distant, almost sorrowful. "You seek the heart," she said softly, without prompting. Eleanor nodded. "Do you know where it is?" The librarian hesitated, then reached beneath the counter, producing a fragile map yellowed with age. "These tunnels run beneath the town. They were sealed long ago after the ritual. Few who enter return." Eleanor traced the lines on the map, dark corridors branching like veins beneath the streets, converging at a central chamber marked only as the heart. "Why did your people seal it?" Eleanor asked. "To contain the evil, but it is restless. The seals weaken every generation. The shadows grow bolder." Armed with the map, Eleanor prepared herself for the descent. She gathered supplies, a flashlight, a knife, matches, and steeled her nerves. The entrance to the tunnels was hidden beneath an old well at the edge of town, overgrown with vines and half-collapsed. As she lifted the heavy stone cover, a cold breeze escaped, carrying a whisper that sent a shiver down her spine. With a final breath, Eleanor descended into the darkness. The tunnels were narrow and damp, the air thick with the smell of earth and decay. Her flashlight flickered, casting long shadows that danced on the rough walls. Every step echoed like a heartbeat, and the whispers grew louder, angry, desperate, warning. The deeper she went, the colder it became. At times, she thought she saw figures lurking just beyond the light, faces twisted in torment, hands reaching out. She pressed on, driven by a mix of fear and determination. Hours passed. Eleanor's legs ached, and the air thinned, making each breath a struggle. Then she reached a vast chamber. The walls were carved with ancient symbols glowing faintly red, and at the center stood a massive stone pulsating with dark energy, a black crystal, throbbing like a living heart. The source of the curse. Suddenly, the shadows surged forward, coalescing into a towering figure with glowing eyes. "You've come to destroy me," it hissed, voice like grinding stone. "But you cannot undo what was done." Eleanor raised her knife, heart pounding. "I can try." The battle that followed was a blur of shadows and light, fear and resolve. The creature lashed out, its form shifting like smoke, trying to engulf her in darkness. But Eleanor fought with every ounce of strength, striking at the black crystal. Each blow sent ripples through the chamber, the shadows screaming in pain. Finally, with a desperate cry, she plunged the knife into the heart. A blinding light exploded, shattering the darkness. The tunnels shook, the shadows screamed, then dissolved into nothingness. Eleanor collapsed, gasping, as silence fell. When she opened her eyes, dawn was breaking. The weight in the air had lifted. The curse was broken. She climbed out of the well, the first rays of sun warming her face. Hawthorne Hollow was silent but free. But somewhere deep inside, Eleanor knew this was only the beginning. The morning sun spilled over Hawthorne Hollow like a hesitant promise, its pale light washing away the lingering shadows that had clung so tightly to the town's bones. Eleanor stepped out from the well's crumbled cover, the fresh air filling her lungs with a mix of relief and exhaustion. The streets looked different in daylight, less haunted, less broken. The fog had retreated, and the ancient houses seemed to breathe once more, their windows reflecting the soft glow of dawn. Yet beneath that fragile calm, Eleanor felt a tremor, an echo of what had been, a whisper that refused to be silenced. She returned to the inn, seeking rest and perhaps some semblance of normalcy. But the innkeeper greeted her with a wary look, his eyes shadowed with something between fear and reverence. "You've done what no one else dared," he said quietly. "The curse is lifted, but the hollow remembers." Eleanor nodded, knowing he spoke of the stories passed down through generations, tales of darkness never fully destroyed, only waiting, biding its time. The librarian met her later that day in the library's dim reading room, her pale face grave. "The crystal's destruction has undone the binding spell," she explained. "But the hollow's heart is older than any curse. Its roots run deep beneath the earth, and so do the memories." Eleanor's fingers brushed over the map once more. "What do you mean?" "There are still echoes," the librarian said, voice barely above a whisper. "Fragments of those lost, and perhaps, remnants of the darkness itself. Some things don't vanish so easily." Determined to understand, Eleanor spent the next days exploring the town and speaking with its few remaining residents. Stories surfaced, of strange dreams, of fleeting shadows seen in the corner of the eye, of voices carried on the wind. One night, as Eleanor walked the edge of the forest, a familiar whisper drifted through the trees. "Not gone. Not gone." Her heart quickened. The shadows had receded but not vanished. That night, Eleanor dreamt of the tunnels again. This time, the darkness was different, less hostile, more beckoning. She saw faces in the shadows, but they were no longer twisted with torment. Instead, they reached out, silent pleas for peace. She awoke with a start, a new resolve burning in her chest. The story of Hawthorne Hollow wasn't over. It was a thread woven into the fabric of the land, tangled with history and pain. To truly free the town, she would need to unravel those threads, and face whatever truths lay beneath the echoes of the hollow. The days that followed were marked by restless nights and uneasy days. Eleanor found herself drawn repeatedly to the edges of the town, the forest, the ruins of old buildings, the forgotten corners where shadows gathered like whispered secrets. The fog, though lighter now, still clung to the hollow places, and the wind carried voices too faint to understand but impossible to ignore. One evening, as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, Eleanor returned to the library to find the librarian waiting. Her eyes held a sadness that seemed to stretch across time itself. "There's more you need to know," the librarian said, motioning Eleanor to sit. "The hollow's heart was never just a crystal or a curse. It's a place, a resting ground for something ancient. Something older than the town, older than the forest." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the book she carried. "What is it?" The librarian sighed. "An echo of the first darkness. The origin of the shadows. Destroying the crystal broke the seal, but it didn't destroy the source. It merely stirred it." That night, Eleanor's dreams returned, visions of vast underground caverns lit by a pale, otherworldly glow. At their center pulsed a massive stone, unlike any earthly mineral, alive with a faint heartbeat. Around it, shadowy figures moved silently, their faces calm but full of sorrow. She awoke with a start, the whispering chorus swelling in her ears. Find the origin, bring peace, her mind raced. The map had shown only one chamber, but the librarian's words hinted at something deeper, hidden beneath the tunnels she had explored. Determined, Eleanor prepared for another descent, this time, deeper and farther than before. Armed with a stronger light and provisions, she followed the map back to the sealed well and climbed down into the darkness. The air grew colder with every step. The walls seemed to close in, the whispers becoming voices, clearer now, speaking not of threats but of longing. The path twisted into uncharted corridors, unfamiliar runes glowing faintly along the stone. Eleanor's heart hammered with equal parts fear and hope. Finally, she reached a vast cavern, its ceiling lost in shadow. At the center, the massive pulsing stone from her dreams hovered above a shallow pool of black water. The source. The cavern was alive with energy, a deep hum that resonated through her bones. The shadows here were not hostile but curious, watching her with eyes like fading stars. As Eleanor stepped closer, the stone's pulse slowed, syncing with her heartbeat. A voice echoed, not from a figure, but from the cavern itself, deep and ancient. You have come far, seeker. Will you be the one to end the cycle? Eleanor swallowed her fear. I want to bring peace. To end the hollow's suffering. The cavern's voice rumbled. To do so, you must give what was taken. A sacrifice. Not of blood, but of memory. To forget the pain, to release the past. Eleanor hesitated. To lose memories of her family, the town, even the darkness itself, was that truly freedom? Or a new kind of loss? But looking into the silent faces in the shadows, she knew what had to be done. Closing her eyes, she reached out, letting the cavern's cold embrace flow through her. Her memories began to fade, the fear, the whispers, the pain, but so too the love, the hope, the resolve. When she opened her eyes, the cavern was still. The stone's pulse had slowed to nothing. The shadows began to dissipate, releasing their grip on the world. Eleanor climbed back to the surface, the dawn breaking anew. The town felt lighter, as if a great weight had lifted. She looked back once at the forest edge. The whispers were gone. For now, the hollow was silent. Days slipped by in a strange haze. Eleanor wandered through Hawthorne Hollow like a ghost untethered, her memories fractured, a fog where certainty once lived. Faces blurred, names slipped through her grasp like smoke. Yet the weight pressing on the town seemed lighter, the air clearer, as if the land itself breathed easier. Still, something nagged at the edges of her mind. The sacrifice had not come without cost. The townsfolk, once wary and closed off, now offered quiet nods and faint smiles. Children played where shadows had once lingered. Flowers bloomed along cracked sidewalks. Life stirred. But Eleanor's heart remained uneasy, an ache she could neither name nor escape. One evening, drawn again to the library, Eleanor found the librarian waiting for her beneath the flickering lamplight. You sacrificed your memories, the librarian said softly, as if reading the silence between Eleanor's words. It was the only way to free the hollow. Eleanor nodded, struggling to hold on to the fragments of her past. But, something feels missing. Like a thread was cut, but not tied back together. The librarian's eyes darkened. The hollow's curse was old and tangled. Even when the heart is silenced, the shadows of pain linger. Healing will take time, and vigilance. She slid a thin, leather-bound journal across the table. This belonged to the first guardian, the one who began the ritual centuries ago. Perhaps it holds the key to restoring what was lost. Eleanor opened the journal, the pages yellowed and fragile. The handwriting was ornate, filled with cryptic notes and drawings of symbols she recognized from the tunnels. As she read, the story unfolded, a tale of sacrifice, love, betrayal, and a hope to break the cycle by rekindling the bond between the living and the lost. The guardian's words spoke of a promise, to remember the past without being bound by it, to honor those lost without letting their pain consume the present. Eleanor understood then that freeing the town was not an end but a beginning. The following days saw her retracing steps, visiting the forests edge, speaking with the townsfolk, and slowly piecing together fragments of history and hope. Each encounter, each story shared, became a stitch in the fragile fabric of healing. Though shadows still lingered at the edges, they no longer whispered threats, they whispered remembrance. And Eleanor, though her memories were dimmed, found new strength in the stories she now helped weave. The hollow was no longer just a place of fear. It was a place of echoes, echoes of the past, of pain, but also of resilience. And as the sun set each night, painting the sky in deep hues of red and purple, Eleanor stood watch, the quiet guardian of a town reborn from darkness. The weeks passed, each day drawing Eleanor deeper into the rhythm of the town, its history, its people, and its secrets. The journal became her constant companion, its fragile pages revealing clues and cautions from a time long buried. One passage caught her attention, describing a hidden chamber beneath the old church on the hill. The guardian's writing spoke of it as a sanctuary, a place where the living and the lost could meet, where the cycle might finally be broken through understanding and remembrance. Driven by a mixture of curiosity and hope, Eleanor decided to investigate. The old church loomed atop the hill like a silent sentinel, its stone walls weathered by centuries of storms. Inside, the air was thick with dust and memories. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, casting fractured colors on the worn wooden pews. Beneath the altar, Eleanor found a loose stone. With effort, she pried it free, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling downward into darkness. Her flashlight's beam wavered as she descended, the walls closing in with cold dampness. At the bottom, a heavy iron door barred the way, covered in the same strange runes she had seen in the tunnels. Recalling the journal's instructions, Eleanor traced a sequence of symbols with trembling fingers. The door creaked open, revealing a small chamber bathed in an ethereal glow. Inside, delicate carvings adorned the walls, faces and figures frozen in moments of grief and hope. At the center stood a stone basin filled with clear water, its surface reflecting the flickering light like a mirror. As Eleanor approached, the water rippled, and the whispers returned, soft this time, filled with longing rather than menace. Kneeling, she cupped her hands and touched the water. A warmth spread through her, memories stirring like embers long forgotten. Visions flooded her mind, of the first guardian, of sacrifices made and promises kept. She saw the faces of those lost, their sorrow mingling with a quiet peace. Tears streaming, Eleanor understood what the journal had meant. The curse could not simply be destroyed, it had to be remembered and honored. Only by embracing the pain and the hope could the town truly heal. she whispered a vow to the shadows and the light alike. To remember, to protect, and to live. Emerging from the chamber, Eleanor felt the weight of her role settle upon her shoulders. The hollow was no longer just a place of darkness but a place of balance, a place where the past and present intertwined. As she climbed the stairs and stepped into the dawn's gentle light, she knew her story was only just beginning. The town had changed, no longer shrouded purely in fear, but marked by a fragile hope that fluttered like a candle's flame in the wind. Yet, as Eleanor walked the streets of Hawthorne Hollow, she felt the pulse of something unseen beneath the surface, an old unrest that stirred quietly in the dark corners. The journal's final entries hinted at a truth never fully told, a secret buried beneath layers of time and silence. One rainy afternoon, Eleanor returned to the library, seeking answers. The librarian greeted her with a knowing glance. "There are things even the Guardian's journal could not reveal," she said softly. "The hollow's shadows have memories of their own, echoes of those forgotten, cast aside by time." Eleanor's curiosity deepened. "Where do I find them?" The librarian handed her a small, rusted key. "The crypt beneath the church. The doors have been sealed for decades. Inside lie the stories of those lost, not just to darkness, but to silence." That night, Eleanor stood before the ancient crypt's heavy iron doors. The key fit perfectly, turning with a reluctant groan. The air inside was cold and thick with dust. Flickering candles cast long shadows across rows of stone coffins, each etched with names worn smooth by time. As she explored, Eleanor discovered a hidden alcove, a narrow passage leading deeper underground. Her heartbeat quickened as she stepped into the unknown, the whispers of the forgotten rising around her like a tide. Deep within the crypt, Eleanor uncovered relics, letters, trinkets, and faded photographs, remnants of lives erased from the town's memory. But something darker lurked here too, scratches in the stone walls, signs of desperate clawing, faint cries echoing in the silence. The shadows shifted, not with menace, but with sorrow. A sudden chill swept through the passage as Eleanor pressed onward, drawn toward a faint glow ahead. There, in the heart of the crypt, she found a shattered mirror, its fractured surface reflecting not her own image, but scenes of long-past horrors and lost souls trapped between worlds. A voice whispered close to her ear, "Remember us." Eleanor realized the true weight of her task. To free Hawthorne Hollow, she must confront the shadows of the forgotten, not just the cursed, but those cast into oblivion by fear, time, and neglect. The journey would test her resolve, her heart, and the fragile line between light and dark. Eleanor's breath came shallow as she stared into the shattered mirror's fractured surface. Each shard seemed to hold a fragment of the past, a whispered moment of despair, a fleeting glimpse of a face lost to time. The images flickered like ghostly memories, refusing to fade. The voice echoed again, soft and insistent. "Remember us." Her fingers brushed the cold glass, and a sudden wave of emotion crashed over her, grief, fear, hope, all tangled together like the roots of the ancient trees outside. Gathering her courage, Eleanor stepped deeper into the crypt's hidden passage. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of earth and forgotten sorrow. At the end of the tunnel, she found a chamber carved from black stone, its walls inscribed with names, hundreds of them, etched in trembling script. These were the forgotten, the souls who had vanished from the town's stories, erased by time and fear. A single candle flickered in the chamber's center, illuminating a small wooden box. Inside lay a bundle of letters, tied with a faded ribbon. Eleanor opened the first letter, its paper brittle but the words clear. To anyone who finds this, know that we were here. We were lost, but not forgotten. Our voices have been silenced, but our stories live on in the shadows. Remember us, so we may rest. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes. She understood now, the shadows were not just darkness but memories, waiting for acknowledgement. Determined to honor the forgotten, Eleanor spent days reading the letters, piecing together stories of love and loss, courage and regret. Each tale brought her closer to the heart of the hollow's pain, and its hope. But as she delved deeper, she felt the shadows watching, not with malice, but with quiet expectation. One night, as a storm raged outside, Eleanor heard a soft tapping at the crypt's entrance. She opened the door to find a figure cloaked in darkness, eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. "I am one of the forgotten," the figure whispered. "And I have waited for someone to remember." Eleanor's heart hammered in her chest as the cloaked figure stepped forward, the faint light revealing a pale face etched with sorrow and wisdom far beyond human years. "I have waited a long time," the figure said, voice like a breeze through dead leaves. "Waiting for the day when someone would see us, not as shadows or ghosts, but as souls who once lived and loved." Eleanor's breath caught. "Who? What are you?" "I am the last of the forgotten," the figure replied. "Bound to this place by pain and neglect. I have watched the town from the shadows, yearning to be free." The figure's eyes glimmered with a haunting sadness. "The curse you broke was only one thread in a tapestry of loss. Many here remain trapped, those cast aside by time, hidden in silence." Eleanor swallowed hard. "How do I help them?" The figure reached out, fingers brushing a weathered letter Eleanor still held. "You must remember. Gather their stories. Share their voices with the living. Only through remembrance can we find peace." A shiver ran through Eleanor, the weight of the task settling like a stone in her chest. "Where do I begin?" she asked. The figure smiled faintly, a glimmer of hope shining through the sorrow. "Here, in the crypt. But the stories are many, and some are dangerous. Not all forgotten souls wish to be remembered." Eleanor nodded, steeling herself. "Then I will face them. For the hollow, and for those lost to its shadows." As the figure faded into the darkness, Eleanor felt the crypt's silence deepen, charged now with purpose and power. She knew the road ahead would be perilous, filled with echoes of pain and moments of light. But she was ready. The shadows of the forgotten awaited her. Eleanor spent the next morning cataloging the letters and relics in the crypt's chamber, each one a thread in the tangled web of Hawthorne Hollow's forgotten past. With every story she read, the faces behind the words seemed to flicker to life. Children lost to illness, lovers torn apart by betrayal, villagers vanished without explanation. But beneath the sorrow, a strange pattern emerged. Many of the forgotten had died under mysterious circumstances, accidents that seemed too cruel, disappearances too sudden. Something dark had been at work long before the curse of the crystal. That night, as the wind howled outside, Eleanor returned to the crypt alone, carrying a lantern and the guardian's journal. The flickering candlelight cast tall shadows on the walls, and the air grew heavy with unspoken memories. She traced her fingers over the carved names, whispering each one aloud. The whispers returned, weaving through the air like a mournful chorus. Suddenly, A cold hand touched her shoulder. Eleanor spun around, heart racing, to see a translucent figure standing just behind her, an old woman, her eyes filled with grief. "I am Margaret," the spirit said softly. "I was one of the first to be forgotten." Eleanor swallowed her fear. "What happened to you?" Margaret's voice trembled. "I was accused of witchcraft. The town turned against me, and I was taken here to die alone." Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes. "I'm sorry. I will remember you." Margaret smiled faintly. "Thank you. But beware, the past holds darker secrets than even you know." With that, the spirit faded into the shadows, leaving Eleanor alone once more. Determined, Eleanor pressed on, knowing the crypt held many more stories and dangers. The hollow's forgotten souls were reaching out, seeking not just remembrance, but justice. And Eleanor would face whatever shadows awaited to bring their stories into the light. The chill in the crypt lingered long after Margaret's spirit faded, but Eleanor stood firm. Each story she uncovered was a thread pulling her deeper into the fabric of Hawthorne Hollow's haunted history. She lit a candle beside the carved names and opened the guardian's journal to the faded sketch of a symbol, a twisted vine encircling a broken heart. The symbol matched faint markings she had seen etched into the walls of the tunnels and on the old church doors. What did it mean? A sign of love and loss, or something far darker? Determined to find answers, Eleanor returned to the ruins on the edge of town, an old estate known as the Wren House, long abandoned and whispered to be cursed. The townsfolk avoided it, their faces pale at the mention. But the journal spoke of the Wren family as central to the Hollow's ancient sorrow, their fate tied to the shadows Eleanor now sought to understand. The house stood against the twilight, its once grand silhouette broken by shattered windows and collapsing beams. Ivy clawed up its walls, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. Eleanor stepped inside, the floorboards groaning beneath her feet. Moonlight filtered through cracks in the roof, illuminating faded portraits and scattered belongings, a child's toy, a cracked mirror, a rusted locket. She felt the weight of unseen eyes watching, memories clinging like cobwebs. In the main hall, Eleanor discovered a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. Inside lay a bundle of letters tied with black ribbon, letters written in hurried, desperate script. As she read, a story unfolded, a tale of forbidden love, betrayal, and a terrible sacrifice made to protect the town from a darkness that had once consumed the Wren family. The letters spoke of a pact, broken promises, and a curse that had seeded the Hollow's shadows. Eleanor realized the roots of the curse were tangled deeper and darker than she had imagined. Her heart pounded as whispers rose around her, echoes of the past, begging to be heard. The weight of the Wren family's tragedy pressed on Eleanor like a storm cloud. Their story, of love shattered, secrets buried, and a sacrifice meant to seal away an ancient darkness, was the missing piece she had sought. The curse had been born from that broken pact, feeding on fear and silence, twisting the Hollow's shadows into chains. But now, armed with truth and remembrance, Eleanor knew the way forward. Returning to the crypt, she gathered the relics and letters, the voices of the forgotten, and prepared to confront the lingering darkness once and for all. The town's fate, and the souls trapped in its shadows, depended on it. As night fell, the crypt's heavy doors groaned open, and Eleanor stepped inside, her heart steady, the guardian's journal in hand, light blazing against the encroaching dark. The crypt was colder than before, the air thick with a silence that felt alive, watchful, expectant. Eleanor's lantern cast long shadows along the stone walls, each step echoing like a heartbeat in the stillness. At the chamber's center, the shattered mirror lay cracked and fractured, its surface pulsing faintly with an eerie light. The darkness that had seeped through the cracks in Hawthorne Hollow seemed to gather here, coalescing into a shape both terrifying and familiar. A figure emerged from the shadows, a twisted reflection of the guardian Eleanor had read about, eyes glowing with a cold fire. "You think the truth alone can break the curse?" it hissed. "The hollow feeds on pain, on fear. Without it, I am nothing. Without me, the town will forget and wither." Eleanor's hands trembled but did not falter. "I am not afraid. You will not hold this town captive any longer." The shadow lunged, swirling darkness and whispering voices. Eleanor raised the journal high, its pages glowing with ancient light. "By the memory of those lost and the strength of those who remember, I banish you." The light from the journal flared, filling the chamber with a blinding radiance. The shadow screamed, unraveling into 1,000 shards of darkness that scattered like dust in the wind. When the light faded, the crypt was still, peaceful, whole. Eleanor stood alone, the weight of the hollow lifted, the curse broken. Outside, the first light of dawn broke over Hawthorne Hollow, casting warmth where shadows once reigned. Eleanor knew the journey was over, but the story would live on. In the hearts of the townsfolk, in the whisper of the wind through the trees, and in every echo of the forgotten now finally set free. The hollow had found its last light. Weeks passed since that final night in the crypt. Hawthorne Hollow breathed anew, its streets filled with soft laughter and the gentle hum of life returning. Eleanor walked beneath the blooming trees, their petals scattering like memories on the breeze. The weight that had pressed upon her heart was gone, replaced by a quiet strength. The townsfolk no longer whispered in fear but spoke openly of the past, of those lost, of the sacrifices made, and of the hope that had finally taken root. At the library, Eleanor placed the guardian's journal on a shelf, its pages worn but alive with stories. A child approached her, eyes wide with curiosity. "Will the shadows ever come back?" the child asked. Eleanor smiled softly. "Not if we remember who we are, and who came before us." She reached down, handing the child a small carved charm, a simple symbol from the journal, a promise of protection and remembrance. As the sun rose higher, casting golden light across the hollow, Eleanor felt a peace she had never known. The echoes beneath the hollow had finally quieted, their stories woven into the fabric of the town's new beginning. And in that dawn, she knew that while shadows might always linger at the edges, the last light would never fade.